Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
It is one of those things as you get older, you sometimes avoid it intentionally because it's just uncomfortable to deal with. I'm talking about estate planning. There's so many emotions involved in it, where assets are going to go, planning ahead of time. But on the back end, look what you would be doing. Peace of mind for everybody, including yourself when you're not here. But just knowing, while you're living here, that things are taken care of. We've got somebody that deals with that and so much more in the financial arena, and he's back with us. It is Nicholas Pihl, financial planner. Welcome. How you doing?
Yeah, great. Glad to be here.
Yeah, good to have you here. And estate planning it's a big thing. It really is. What's the starting point when you're looking at planning for the future like that?
Yeah, well, so it's something I talk about with all the people that I work with. It's not always the first thing that we talk about because they usually come in for some other questions around like, when can I retire? How much money can I take from my portfolio? But inevitably, there's a point where we've covered the other topics enough to a point where like, okay, that's going to be good. That's not going to be like the crisis that comes and bites us like down the road. But estate planning really is a lot of times this neglected thing that people like you said, they don't like thinking about their own death. There's a million ways to justify like not sitting down with a really deliberate plan. And honestly, there are some tough decisions to be made there. Like a common example would be people with like children from prior marriages. So, and I guess we're just kind of getting right into the weeds here, but that's a scenario where if let's say there's like two people, both of them have kids from previous relationships, they're divorced, maybe their spouses are still living, or it's not really as relevant. They get married, and then one of those people dies. In the absence of any planning in a lot of states, Oregon included, the assets of the survivor go to the person that they married. Maybe they married in their 50s or 60s, and maybe they've been married for 20 years, in fairness to them. But when their assets go to that partner, and then the partner dies, or maybe the partner remarries later, which would be kind of an even worse version of this. The partner dies, they usually will leave all of their assets to their kids. And in the absence of other, like a trust or other like estate planning decisions, like that's what generally would happen. And this isn't, legal advice, but this is just like, hey, this is a risk that you should talk about. Sure. And think about like, okay, how do I make sure that I don't like accidentally disinherit my kids, while still being able to move forward with a good relationship with, like a new partner, whether you're, in your 50s, 60s, or even 70s. I mean, people, it's like generally good to have a partner. So
sure. And what's the difference between estate planning and having a will?
So having a will is a piece of estate planning. There are a few other pieces too, like having a healthcare power of attorney, financial power of attorney. So if you're in a hospital and maybe you're not conscious, or you're not able to like direct like the doctor's decisions for you about like if you're having a heart attack, you usually aren't in a position to say like, hey, I want like the most advanced measures of life-saving treatment, or I don't want that. I don't want to be kept alive on like a machine. Right. Like I'd rather, so that's like one thing. Right. And then financially, especially towards end of people's lives, just managing the sheer number of details becomes a risk. The risk of like falling for scams goes way up, just because you get a little like foggier in say your 80s and 90s, where it's just just the likelihood of people falling for stuff is higher. Like that's where the data say anyway. Like the older you get, the more likely you are to get scammed. So having some safeguards and barriers there too, which isn't really anything to do with your death. It's just kind of as you lose like the ability to keep track of everything with quite the sharpness that you used to have, it can be good to have like a helper involved, have some plans in place there.
What is the legal precedence when you do a will and then you're doing the estate planning? Is everything that was figured out in the estate planning go into the will, and the will is the Bible, if you will, or
like the Constitution?
Yeah, exactly.
Not exactly. So, I mean, there's a couple of options, and this is, a gross oversimplification. And my whole goal here is just to like get a conversation started for people.
Sure.
Maybe a listener is like, hey, I should really talk about this with my partner. And I was like, great, that'd be a great outcome for me. Um, so there are two types of documents. Some states, a will is all you need, and like a trust would really be irrelevant. But generally, a trust is a set of instructions for how assets are to be handled after your death. It's like a bucket with like you put all of your stuff into this bucket, and it's got like a label on the side of it that says like split evenly amongst like our children, or take X amount, give it to charity, whatever, whatever the plan may be. And another, so if you have that like the blended family scenario, you could say like, okay, the surviving spouse gets to use like the interest and dividends that come off of the portfolio, but when they die, the portfolio goes to like the first person who died's kids. So like if it's you, do you have kids, Steve?
I do. Yep.
Okay. And are you married?
Currently not.
Okay, great. This works perfectly for the example. I'm happy to hear.
Okay.
Uh,
Me too.
Yeah.
For a variety of reasons, but that's not for this show.
Yeah. No, let's not go there.
Yep. All good.
But okay, so let's say like at some point you get remarried, and like you and your new partner has kids from like a previous relationship, right?
Yep.
You want to make sure, presumably, that like when you die, or at some point after you die, your assets go to your kids as opposed to their kids. Or if they remarry and they die first, then it's like everything's going a step further to some guy you might not have ever met, and then everything goes to like that stranger's kids instead of to your kids. So that sucks. Like that's what we're trying to avoid here.
Yeah, totally gotcha. And you do have the option, if you remarry, if you wanted to leave it to your kids and a portion to your stepchildren, that's at your discretion. Legally, though, let's say you didn't do any of this.
Not a lawyer, I can't give legal advice.
Okay. Well,
yeah,
based on what we know,
you got to cue it up a little different, but like,
yeah, okay,
we can work with it.
Yeah, theoretically,
Perfect.
more times than not, if you remarry and your partner has kids, automatically, typically, in most states, disclaimers all coming forward here.
Sure.
Does it get equally dispersed if you don't set it up in any kind of a trust to your stepchildren and your biological children?
Like if there's no other documents,
right?
Like, generally, no. It would just go to like your future partner's kids. Like if you die first, right? Or vice versa. Maybe she dies first, and I'm assuming about like your sexual orientation, but like she dies first, her assets would go to you as the spouse, and then when you die, all of like your assets, meaning yours and hers, would then go to like your kids, leaving her kids out in the rain.
Is that typically that's how it happens? I'm kind of surprised. I thought that once you remarry, now it kind of resets everything. But what I'm understanding,
it might be different in different states. I don't know all 50 states. I can't really speak to that, but I know like in Oregon, that's the general rule. Yeah.
Wow. All right. I want to make sure I have that clear, because that could transcend to other states. So you remarry, you have kids, your partner has kids,
right?
You pass away,
your assets don't automatically go to your kids.
Your assets don't automatically go to your kids. It goes to your new partner.
Right.
And all of it goes to your new partner, and your kids could potentially, if your partner didn't do the right thing, could not, and you don't have any documentation,
right?
Then your kids could be left out in the cold and get nothing.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so this actually happened to a family friend of ours. Like this exact scenario. So this is like why I'm passionate about it.
Sure.
Yeah, it was a super bitter experience. Like this guy's dad had worked really hard and like accumulated a good chunk of assets. And in that particular case, he had gone into the marriage saying, okay, yeah, this everything goes to my children. But unbeknownst to the kids, there was a change to the estate documents and to the will that his wife made at a time when he may not have had capacity, but it's you can't prove it. He's gone. And so like she got everything and then her kids get everything. And like this guy who like worked so hard for his like career and wanted to like leave money to his kids to help pay for his grandkids' college.
Sure.
Help his son retire a little earlier, instead of having to work until like his mid 60s. So or yeah, mid late 60s. Now all of that's out the window, and like this lady like gets everything. So suffice it to say, his kids and this lady are not on good terms.
Yeah, and this is just all the more why we're talking about this, because you don't designate, it could go anywhere. And I've lived it with other family members, and the stories I could tell.
Right.
We'll just leave it at that.
Here's a crazy one. So when people get divorced, they don't sometimes update the beneficiaries on their 401ks.
Yeah.
So 401ks actually trump a will. Like you could write in your will, like, I want, my kids to receive everything, right? If your 401k statement says ex-wife, that supersedes the will, and everything in that account would then go to your ex. Isn't that crazy? Like,
it really is. And by the way, when I was getting divorced, the first thing I did I had some money I got from my mom, financial planner, got him on the phone, and TOD, terms of death, and pushed it all to my kids. But he did tell me at that time that, we can do that, but it's not ironclad. So, getting back to what we're talking about, that you need to have something legally, even though, that's technically what I'm speaking of is not maybe, a beneficiary, but it is the terms of death. It's got to be documented, legally documented. And many of us don't do that, or we forget things like you're saying.
Right. Yeah. And honestly, a big part of my job is just going through like all the details and like, hey, like, what are the things that people don't know to look for, or that, they don't have the checklists that they're running in the background that I do. And how do we avoid disasters? That, no one's goal is to like, well, I mean, maybe it is a conscious choice for someone to like leave their 401k to like their ex-spouse. Like, actually, yeah, I have a client who's kind of like on the fence about it, because it's like they raise their kids together. They're like left amicably. It's like all on pretty good terms, but they're, and then this guy has like plenty of money. His business is done really, really well. And he's like, yeah, I don't mind like leaving money to like my children's mother. And so that there are those people,
sure.
But like, as far as conscious choices, and they should always be conscious. So that's one thing. And the other thing with a will, assets go through a process called probate after you die.
What is probate? I've heard it. I'm pretty sure I know what it is, but let's go there.
So it's just a legal proceeding. So basically, and it depends on each state. So for Oregon, you have to wait 4 months after the death of the person, and you have to like post public notice saying like, hey, this person died. Any like creditors or people who think they're entitled to part of the estate, have some time to like be notified and then come forward about like outstanding debts. And then so you have to hire like a probate lawyer, because it goes before through a judge, and the judge has to sign off on it. So it's this lengthy and fairly expensive process. It's like a few $1,000s, and you're paying that with money that you might not have like in your checking account too.
Wow.
Or your kids are.
So is probate just that period of time that
it's the legal process by which that happens. So then everything still has to get signed off on by a judge, and that's a chance for all sorts of estranged children to come forth and say like, hey, I want my piece of the estate, even though like my dad and I haven't talked in 30 years. And like maybe the dad didn't want to leave money to this person, or like, you don't know. cousins, nephews, nieces. Hey, he told me I was going to get the like whatever, the old Mustang convertible. And
Right.
then, it's rife with drama and family conflict. So a better way to do it would be to just create a trust. And there's all kinds of different trusts. I don't want to get into it, but basically a trust is that like set of instructions that is like very mechanical and says, okay, this person gets this person gets that, and like that supersedes whatever a will says, and then you title all the accounts so that the trust gets executed instead of like the account level execution.
Wow.
Within a trust, you can set it up so that your partner can live off the income from the money, use some of the money, but the body of that money then gets preserved for your children. Like there's a lot of options that you can really tailor anything, but at least in Oregon, like a trust is the most like airtight way to do that.
When I've heard this term often, irrevocable trust. What does that mean?
So that basically means that you're taking money out of your name and out of your estate and putting it into this trust. There's a few reasons why you might do that. One of them would be like asset protection. So if you want to make sure that like the money's out of your hands, so if someone comes and sues you, that like that money is harder to get to, not impossible necessarily. There's some like details that you have to iron out there, but you can make it a little harder for like creditors to come after you, or lawyers to come after you. The other thing would be like planning around estate taxes. So right now, like the estate tax exclusion is fairly high relative to history. I think it's something around $13 million per person that gets excluded from your federal estate taxes. But then it's like 40% of your estate is taxed after that. So it's a pretty hefty like tax bill if you do have money above that amount. And more importantly, that limit is set to come back down to, I think, I know I'm wrong on the number, but it's roughly like 5 or 6 million per person. So if you're in that range of like 5 to like 12 million after 2025, that's where gifting assets out of the estate could make sense. But the downside there is you lose control of the assets.
Say that last part again.
The downside there is that you lose control of the assets. So you gift the money out of your estate, and then it's like someone else's money. Like you don't have the ability to make decisions for it because it's not your money anymore.
Got it. Okay.
And you might be able to set up terms of it where you're like, okay, hey, I get the interest and dividends off of that money. But in terms of like, once you've put those instructions in place and put the money into that, it's out of your hands, and it's just whatever the mechanical document says that you're supposed to do gets enacted. Which can be good or bad, but yeah.
Do people opt for a trust because with a will, typically there's an executor, and if you don't want to have somebody overseeing everything, is that why we go toward a trust?
You'll still need an executor. And you'll need a trustee actually.
Okay.
To like oversee and manage all of the details of the trust.
And when you set it up, what's your function as a financial planner and handling investment management?
A huge part of my job is just saying, hey, here's what could go wrong. Here's what I've seen go wrong. Here's what I've heard go wrong from, like everyone's got stories about this stuff. Friends, family, like, for sure. And I love collecting these stories. It's like, okay, wow, how do we avoid this? It's a vicarious experience. So that's a big part of it. I can't like write or execute documents, right? Like I'm not a lawyer, but I can point people in a good direction and say like, hey, for your situation, you've got say someone's got like less than $2 million. We could say, okay, so for Oregon, here's kind of what your tax bill will be on the state estate taxes. You won't really have the federal taxes, and so it's more educational. And then just say, okay, so for you, here are the problems to avoid. Like you don't want everything to go through probate. You don't want to have to like hire lawyers. You don't want to open the door to like people seeking that money. You don't want to open the door to like your new spouse's children getting the money on accident. And so like I'll highlight all of those, and for this example, maybe it's a revocable trust with like a Q-tip provision, or like a Q-tip trust. So like it's a revocable trust still is all of your own money, but like once you die, maybe part of it goes straight to your kids, part of it goes to your partner, and then maybe part of it is held aside for your kids, but your partner can take some of the income off of it. So you can like break it up into pieces to serve different functions after you're gone. So you're kind of saying like you're setting a set of rules, or like a constitution does for a country. Like, hey, when you have this problem in the future, like here's how you deal with that.
Got it. Wow, there's
Yeah.
so much involved here. That's why we need somebody
I
like
know it's very complicated to get to
it
in a half
is.
hour, but
Yeah, and all the more reason why we wouldn't want to touch any of this, or even begin to, because there's so many different pieces of the puzzle, uh, and the method behind it, the legal aspect of it, and
yeah.
you miss one little thing, and it's a big thing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And like a common example would be if you name your accounts specifically and say like, hey, so and so gets my like Wells Fargo checking account, so and so gets whatever. And like maybe at the time you write the document, it's all like maybe it's like $30,000 amongst like your three grandkids. They each get, 10,000 from like these different accounts. Well, what happens if you close one of the accounts? If you're like over specific about it, two of the kids get what they wanted, but one of the kid, like the account has $0 in it, and you were like too specific about what you're leaving them. So like that would suck.
Yeah, yeah, and these things we forget, or what happens if the bank changes name? Anything could happen along the
Right.
way, and what I'm getting from you,
Yeah.
Nicholas, is this is not a set it and forget it. This is a
Yeah.
put it into place, revisit in a couple of years, maybe a couple after that, because things change.
Yeah. And that's really where I come in as a financial advisor and as a planner for people. It's just to say, okay, here's what we talked about last time. Has anything changed? And usually I'm pretty savvy to changes in people's lives. Like for some of my younger clients, I found out that they were expecting a baby before like their parents did, because they came to me and they're like, hey, financially, anything I need to know? Like, don't tell my parents, but like,
Wow.
so, I'm pretty in the loop with people. It's like a privileged position to like be a confidant for people as they talk through this stuff and make decisions.
Sure.
So, I don't know. I guess
And
I'm
they
just kind of bragging here, but
no, but I totally get it. They put their trust in you, but also you have a passion for the dynamics of families and
mhm.
understand what is happening, what could happen, and you can echo that when you work with clients. What
Yeah,
could I think if somebody didn't have that personal stake and passion, a lot is lost. A
right,
lot is lost because every situation is very different.
right. It's as different as the people who are in the situation,
Yeah,
right? Same situation, different people, completely different decisions.
and
Um,
it's got to maybe drive you crazy too when you hear of these stories where people didn't plan and it's like all they had to do was check off a box or whatever it is.
yeah, yeah. So I'm looking over stuff I like on a really regular basis. Anytime someone's life changes, at least every couple of years, every two or 3 years. So like, hey, does this still reflect your wishes? Is this still a reality? Has anything changed that would affect this? Like
Sure.
because people, I mean, sometimes like something happens to their grandkids, or like they find, okay, this person is going to need like some living assistance for the rest of their life because um they find that they have like special needs or something, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing that can change. Yeah. And as far as like managing all the details of all this, I thought at his last shareholder meeting, Buffett had some good advice for people. And this, from one of the richest guys in the world who's like got his head on pretty straight when it comes to money and like values.
Sure.
And his advice was I wouldn't sign a will or any documents that I hadn't talked about with my kids first. And with that, the idea isn't like, hey, the kids need to approve of all the decisions you're making, but just say, hey, here's what's up. Here's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Now's the time if you're going to make your case, now's the time, because someday I'm going to be gone. And like, let's hash this all out now, so you don't like have resentments that keep you from being
Right.
good siblings to one another after I'm gone. Right. because a lot of families fall apart once the
Yes, they do.
patriarch or matriarch dies.
Yes, they do. And that happens a lot. You're right.
Yeah. Like the show Succession is basically about this, right? Like
They could do a reality show about this. What happens behind the scenes, but communication is key.
that would be a good reality show, actually.
Right? Yeah.
If you're looking for a second career, yeah.
You're like on the back end, every show features a different financial planner or maybe an attorney in the stories that, even as he's going through meeting with the families and everything, and that can get a little bit challenging too. Or even, dealing with the trust after somebody passed away. Nicholas, great advice today and an eye opener for a lot here when it comes to estate planning. If we want to connect with you, how do we find you?
So I'm on, just my website is probably the best place, pihlfinancialplanning.com, Pihl financialplanning.com. I'm on LinkedIn and Facebook as well for my business. You can Google it. I'll turn on. So there's I've got some articles there people can read. I try and post helpful things to like get thoughts going, and then there's links to schedule appointments there too. So that'd be a good next step.
So important, and just another reminder: don't wait. Time is really not on your side when it comes to this type of thing. And it doesn't.
My hope would be you create the document and then don't need it for 40 years, right? Like,
sure. Yeah.
Ideally.
And it doesn't matter, what age you are. I hate to say it, but tomorrow's not guaranteed. Anything could happen. And why would you want to take a chance of those that survive you being unhappy or things not being done to your wishes? So
just you're missing the opportunity to take care of people that you care about.
Sure. Yeah. Take control of your assets. You worked hard for them. Thank you so much for being here today. Really appreciate all the details.
Always a pleasure, Steve.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. All right. We'll catch up soon.
All right. Talk to you later.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house. And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.